Recording on here.
Going live.
I'm going to start live video on the Facebook group. Let's see if this works. And we're live. Good evening, Bushy.
Good evening,
Nick.
All right, so we are live on Zoom and we are live on Facebook. So hello,
Hold on,
entirety of Bushy as well. We are going to be doing Pesach perspectives tonight. Now, for all those listening on Zoom, I am going to mute you for a little bit, if that's okay. But you can, I don't know, raise your hand if you have any questions. But the truth is, I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then I'm going to allow people to chime in as well. What we've got for you tonight for Pesach perspectives is some cleaning tips, because everybody is going to be thinking about how on earth are they going to get their houses clean for Pesach? How on earth are they going to get everything ready when they are so busy with everything else? Especially if you are at home with your children, how do you expect to get everything done if every 2 seconds your kids come along and make whatever mess they make straight after you've gone in and just tried to clean something? So what I'm going to be doing for you all this evening is I'm going to be sharing a document. It's a PDF file, and you'll see some of the tips that I have put together with the consultation of our senior rabbinic leader, Rabbi Feldman. Thank you, Rabbi. We are going to be putting that live on the Zoom group. So if you would like to, quickly jump in on Zoom and you'll see it there. For everybody else, we haven't yet figured out how to share it to Facebook at the same time as streaming live. So everyone on Zoom can see this. I actually do think we might be able to do something, if I'm really quick, where we put the file onto, I've lost the file now. I'll upload it to the Facebook group after. That's a good compromise, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, so what we are going to talk about tonight, as I said, is some handy tips to get our houses ready. There are a few rules that one needs to remember. Rule number 1, dust is not chametz. Rule number 2, dust is not chametz. Rule number 3, dust is not
Chametz.
chametz. That's right. So that is the most important things that we have to understand. You know, there's a lot of people in our community and beyond who are really getting quite concerned about what they are going to have to do to get their houses ready. So it's really important to understand and to remember that we are not here to drive ourselves crazy. We are here to make sure that we don't have any chametz in our houses. Broadly speaking, we have to have 2 things in mind when we're thinking about chametz on Pesach. Number 1, we have to make sure that we do not own any chametz in our homes over Pesach. And number 2, that we do not see any chametz that we own over Pesach. Now, seeing is the really important thing here. That's why we have the recommendation of putting chametz items, locking them away, sealing them in the cupboard, making sure that they can't be accessed during the time of Pesach, and we sell it. We sell it to a non-Jewish person, and that chametz, even though it's in our houses, is not ours. It belongs to somebody else. Legally, in Jewish law, at the very least, they have the right to come to your house and take a biscuit or whatever it is that you've left in the cupboard.
I suspect that might not be the case this year.
How have you unmuted yourself, Mark? That is very cheeky there. So legally, that's what the terms and conditions are of the sale of chametz. They have the right to come and help themselves to their chametz, even though it's temporarily stored in your home. I'm getting a message here. Not good reception. That is not good news.
Yeah, it's perfect for me.
It's perfect on Zoom. Nicole, could you explain what you mean quickly, somehow? Put my phone off silent.
To be fair, Bushy internet has been very dodgy all day long because of the amount of traffic. So it might just be traffic flow at this time of night.
Okay, well, apologies to anyone watching on Facebook. It is going to be uploaded onto YouTube afterwards. I'm not quite sure why the microphone is not working well. I might try and remedy that while I'm live with you. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. We have a problem of owning chametz in our homes, and we have a problem of seeing chametz that we own in our homes. And that is the basis of why we have to clean. Because really, if we think about it, every year when we do betikat chametz and when we do bi'ur chametz, we say a formula. We say a Jewish halachic formula, and that formula actually nullifies and declares the chametz as ownerless. So theoretically, we should just be able to say that phrase, declare everything ownerless, and we wouldn't even need to clean our houses. But as we said, there's a problem that we might see chametz in our homes during that time, which gives us two problems. Number one, it gives us the problem that we might see this chametz and think, oh, I don't want to lose that. And then we will reacquire the chametz and put it under our ownership, which is a problem because we can't own chametz on Pesach. And that only applies if it's chametz of a particular size, which we call a kazayit, which translates as an olive size. And if that's the case, then crumbs would not actually be included in this. But we're going to come back to crumbs later. Okay, so what we're concerned about at the moment is seeing big pieces of chametz. Number two is that we might come to eat chametz. If we see something that looks particularly appetizing, we might say, I'm going to tuck in to whatever it is that I have found. And if that's the case, then we have a problem because we're not allowed to eat chametz at all. But if that's the case, then the chametz that we're talking about is clean, appetizing chametz, and not something moldy and dirty and dusty that you found wherever it is you found it, under a cupboard or under a chair or something like that. So we do need to clean, but as we'll see, there's a difference between the types of rooms that we are cleaning. If we are cleaning most of the house, okay, this is really important. If we were cleaning most of the house, which are areas that you do not prepare food and you do not eat food, then to clean those areas is much easier than people think. As we've said, dust is not chametz. Those were our first three rules. Dust is not chametz, dust is not chametz, dust is not chametz. Spring cleaning is not Pesach cleaning. And Pesach cleaning is not spring cleaning. They're two completely distinct things. If you want to be crazy and go and spring clean, that's your discretion, but that is not called Pesach cleaning. That is called spring cleaning, and it's just unfortunate that the two often coincide, right? But the areas where you are not preparing food and the areas where you are not eating food, there is most likely going to be no chametz in those areas. And that is significant and very important to understand. Not only that, but furniture that isn't normally moved and isn't normally taken away during normal daily life, then we don't need to move those items to be able to check if we have a reasonable expectation that no chametz has ever been taken there. So we don't need to start moving beds. We don't need to start, detaching fixed kitchen appliances and things like that, because we don't put food there normally. And even if there is food under there, it's going to be gross, it's going to be filthy, it's going to be moldy, it's going to be dusty. And so when we declare our chametz ownerless, which we do with bedikat chametz and which we do with biur chametz, so then that chametz becomes ownerless. We don't own it. We don't want it. If you really want to go crazy, then you can just spray bleach under those areas, which can make the food, any chametz under there, completely inedible. And then you really just don't need to worry about it. So if you are a person who is trying to find a balance of preparing their house for Pesach in a way that is halachically acceptable, and also not going too crazy, and taking all the clothes out of the cupboard and refolding them and putting them away again, and whatever else people do when they spring clean. So then this is really important stuff to remember. That being said, there are some places where we need to think about checking. So these are places where we might inadvertently leave stuff during the year and forget that it's there. So things like kids' school bags. I don't know about you, but most days I come home and there's a half-eaten sandwich in my kids' bags. Or the glove compartments is another place.
Rabbi Nick?
Hello. Oh,
Hi,
Melissa.
I don't think your sound's on Facebook Live. No one can hear you.
Yeah, so I understand. Is it not coming through? Oh, that would explain why there's only 2 people watching.
Can you change the sound setting? Sorry to
I have
interrupt.
not figured out how to make the sound better on Facebook Live, unfortunately. But it will be uploaded onto Zoom, onto YouTube, and the document will be shared as well.
Okay. It's completely silent. I don't know if you want to switch it off.
I'm not certain why. I have no idea why. I can't work it out.
Sorry, which interrupt.
Maybe just put a comment on the Facebook Live if you wouldn't mind, just to explain that he can't understand why his mic's not working.
Yeah.
And sign on to Zoom. Okay, so school bags, glove compartments, these kinds of places where you might put things during the year and then forget about them, they're really important to check. So that's with regards to the rest of the house, and we're going to see some things very shortly as to each room in more depth. But when it comes to food preparation areas or areas where we eat food, so then it is a bit different, because we also have to make sure separately that no crumbs of chametz fall into our food. Okay, to be able to see chametz in our houses, if we've been talking about the rest of the house, so we're worried about big, really juicy looking pieces, but we have a separate problem. We can't eat chametz at all in any quantity. And so when it comes to preparing food, we have to make sure that there's not even a chance that crumbs of chametz can fall into our food. And that is why these areas require more focus and more attention, because if we find chametz, right, any size, a big, chunky, nice piece of chametz, that's a problem. And if we find crumbs, that's going to be a problem if they come into contact with our food. And if we eat them, it's going to be even worse. So that is why when it comes to kitchens and eating areas, we have to be more careful. When it comes to the rest of the house, so then there is more scope for just making sure that we can't see any big pieces. So, for example, we've got bedrooms. I'm assuming we all live in houses or residences with bedrooms. So in those kinds of rooms, we just have to make sure that we can't find big pieces of chametz. So that might be looking on the floor, might be looking in the beds. You never know what your kids are doing, right? That might mean looking on the windowsills, looking in the cupboards, and that shouldn't really take long. You are able to Pesach clean your bedroom in a matter of minutes, and bathrooms would be the same thing, right? Look for big pieces, take them away if they're in there for whatever reason. But if they're not in there, then your bedroom is clean for Pesach. That is, of course, unless there is a reasonable expectation that people are taking food into those areas, in which case you do have to check. If your children are children that take their food all around the house, then you might need to look under the bed. Then you might need to look in these places. But if these are areas that you don't typically take food into, then chances are there's no food in there. When it comes to studies and bookcases, so we don't need to sit there checking every single book to see if a bit of bread got in there at some point. We don't need to do that. But there is a recommendation that we don't read our books over our food over Pesach if we do have that concern. When it comes to living rooms and play areas, so it's a similar kind of thing. If no food is going in there, then no food is going in there. If there is, then we do need to be a bit more thorough. We need to check between the seats of our couches and our chairs, and we might need to look underneath them and behind them if we move them. If they're fixed in place, then they are fixed in place. But again, we're only looking for significant chunks of food. When it comes to toys, so the best idea is to choose toys that are going to be used over Pesach. Make sure that those are clean. And then anything that you don't necessarily need to play with over Pesach, or your children don't need to play with over Pesach, then you can just put those away and sell them with the rest of your chametz. If you've got little toys like Lego and other, little plastic pieces, so you can chuck them into the bath or chuck them into a washing up bowl, give them a bit of a rinse with a bit of water and a bit of soap. You can put them through the dishwasher if you can figure out a way to do that without clogging all kinds of pipes and drains. And then those things are good to go. And when it comes to areas like where we put our coats or where we put bags and school bags and things like that, so check the pockets that there's nothing in them, that they haven't left a half-eaten chocolate bar or something like that. But then that is done. You've got rid of, you've Pesach cleaned those areas. You don't need to start going through all of your laundry. If you've got clean clothes, then there won't be any big chametz pieces in there. So if you're on top of your laundry, then you're going to be completely fine. There's one thing that I do want to point out over here, which is that people, excuse me, really do go, sorry, I meant to go, people do get very eager to do what they think is doing proper Pesach cleaning. But as we've just seen and as we've just said, one has to realize what we're doing. We're just trying to get rid of chametz. We're not trying to drive ourselves crazy. We're not trying to destroy our Yom Tov. We're not trying to come into Pesach exhausted, miserable, upset, stressed, fed up, bored, whatever the word is. That's not the idea. There's an amazing idea that that I heard, that when Moses first encounters God, he encounters him at the burning bush, right? I assume we're all familiar with that. And when he sees this burning bush, he sees a bush on fire, but he says, and he notices that the bush is not being consumed. And there's a powerful insight that Hashem was trying to communicate to Moses at this time. And the idea is as follows. There has to be a fire and a passion and a burning desire within us to do God's will and to do the mitzvot. But it's not supposed to destroy us. It's not supposed to consume us. It's not supposed to be a destructive passion and a destructive fire and one that brings us down and drags us down. That's not what's supposed to happen. So if we're finding that these things are destroying us and a massive burden for us, then it might be that we're not doing them correctly. There is an idea that that to go the whole hog and to really go crazy with your Pesach cleaning, it's a very admirable thing to do. If a person has the strength and the time and the ability, then great, go for it. But if it's something that's going to ruin your attitude towards Pesach, it's just not worth it. There's a famous story that I like to tell about this, of a guy who checks into a hotel and the bellboy comes to take his luggage, and he goes up to his room, he waits for the bellboy to arrive, and as he's standing outside his room watching this bellboy lug his luggage down the corridor, he turns to the bellboy and he says, "That's not my suitcase." And the guy's like, "But I've just lugged it up 4 flights of stairs." And he says, if you've had to schlep it, if you've had to lug it, if it's too heavy for you, that was not my luggage. My luggage is light. And that's the same with mitzvot as well. Mitzvot are there to bring us enjoyment. They're there to bring us satisfaction. They might require effort, but the result is supposed to be one of joy and exhilaration. And if we are finding that it's crushing us and it's oppressing us, then we might not be doing it right. So if you're in that kind of situation, reach out to us and let us help you with that. So we've looked at rooms around the house. Rooms, as we've said, where we're not expecting chametz to be there, and so we just have to be looking for big pieces. But now we turn to areas where we're preparing food and where we're eating food. And in such places, the recommendations do change, because then we're looking for chametz of any size, okay? So you're gonna have a dining room or some area where you eat, and we're gonna have to get those tables and chairs ready. So in those areas, we should be looking to clean the chairs. We should be giving them a spritz down and a wipe down. We should be cleaning our tables with an appropriate spray, one that does not destroy the material from which your table is made. And then we're supposed to try and cover it with a sturdy plastic cover, which you can get made to measure in shops like Good For You. I'm not sure if they do them in Home Needs as well, but that is what you should be doing for our dining room chairs, our dining room tables and our kitchen tables. Spraying them down, make sure they're clean, making sure that there's no traces and crumbs of chametz, and then covering them with a sturdy plastic cover. And as if you've got bookshelves in your dining room, then the same thing again. We don't need to check each individual book, but just don't bring the books to the table when you're eating, just to be on the safe side. We also have an idea that we don't use the same benches that we use during the year. So it's a good idea to have yourselves a stack of different benches, or it's in the Haggadah as well. So if you've got access to your Haggadah during the week of Pesach, then you can use that as well. Now we turn to the kitchen, the bit you've all been waiting for. So in the time remaining, let's spend a bit of time talking about the kitchen. Okay, so when it comes to the surfaces in your kitchen, we have to, again, make sure that they're wiped down. We have to make sure that they're clean. But it will depend on what your work surface is made out of. That will determine what kind of process you need to do for your for the work surface. Okay, because if you have a work surface that is made from what we call a non-porous surface, all right, so that would include things like stainless steel, that will include things like quartz and granite. So those surfaces can be kashered and used as you would use them the rest of the year. So once they're clean and wiped down, you can pour hot water from an urn or from a kettle over the entirety of the surface, and then it's good to go for Pesach. But if you have other work surfaces, then after you've cleaned and after you've wiped everything down, it's a good idea also to clean underneath the lips of the work surface. You'd be amazed at what kind of residue builds up over there. But once you've done that, so then you should cover the work surface in a way that is going to ensure that food cannot come into contact with those surfaces. And that is how we prepare our work surfaces for Pesach. When it comes to preparing our sinks for Pesach, so again, if you have a stainless steel sink or if you have a granite sink, you can clean the sink and the tap, you can pour bleach down the sink hole, wait 24 hours, and then after that, you can pour boiling water over the tap, all of the surfaces of the sink, and then that sink is good to go for the whole of Pesach. All right, it's important to not have drain guards that you use the whole year. Don't use those for Pesach as well. Either do without them or buy yourself some new ones. But if you have a stainless steel or granite sink, then that is good to go for the whole of Pesach. If you have a sink made out of another material, then again, clean it down, wipe it down, and then you should use separate bowl inserts in your sink, like a washing up bowl or something like that. Have one for meat, have one for dairy, and then your sink will be ready to go for Pesach as well. Now, hobs take a little bit longer. When it comes to hobs, we've got different types of hobs. We've got gas hobs, and we've got ceramic hobs and induction hobs and all those kinds of things. So let's try and go through these. All right, when it comes to a gas hob, the burners do not need kashering, but we do need to make sure that everything else is nice and clean. So we need to make sure to clean the surface of the hobs really well. We have to make sure to clean the grates and the grills. You can do this in the dishwasher. So you can clean the grates and the grills, even in the dishwasher, and then wait 24 hours. And after that, once everything's been put back on, the recommendation is you take a wide pan. It can be a chametz pan, just has to be clean and not used for 24 hours. Put a little bit of water in it so it doesn't burn the pan, and then put it over each hob for 10 minutes at a time on full flame. And what that does is, because it's got a wide surface underneath, the fire is going to be concentrated and blitz your hob grills or your hob grates, whatever it is that you call them. All right, so each of the gas hobs has to be done for 10 minutes each. And then once that is done, then wait for everything to cool down, safety at all times, cover the hob surface with tin foil and make sure to leave holes where the fire beds are, obviously, but then your hob is ready to go. All right. If you have a ceramic hob, then you're going to want to make sure it's cleaned well. And then you're going to run the hobs, all of the hobs, on the highest setting for 10 minutes. And once that has been done, your ceramic hob is going to be good for Pesach. I'm going to come to you in a second, Leslie. Induction hobs, they're slightly more complicated. So once you've cleaned those well, if you do have an induction hob, we recommend getting in touch with either myself or Rabbi Feldman for further guidance on how to prepare induction hobs. Leslie, what did you want to come in on?
Is there a reason why you've put there that the pan that you put over the burners has to have a small bit of water in it? I mean,
apparently that stops the pan burning.
So it can have a lot of water. In other words, does the water have to come to the boil?
No. No, apparently the water is just there. I'm no good at food tech, but apparently the water is just there to protect the pan.
Okay, so it's not there.
What you're trying to achieve with the pan, if a person has a blech, they can just put a blech over it and have that going. But what you're trying to achieve is to make sure that there's a surface covering the flame for a significant time that allows the heat to spread through all of the parts of the grill and to blitz it.
Oh, so you mentioned the blech. So I do have a metal tin blech. If I put that over it, I could have all the burners on at the same time.
Yes.
Well, okay. Thank you.
Richard.
If you've got separate burner covers for your hob, gas hob, do you still need to go through that process?
What you mean, like you've got separate racks?
Yes. So
Or do you mean the little circles?
Yeah, for our gas burners, we've got a completely different set of the little circles, the holders that they sit on top of, and then the things that sit on top of those. The racks that then sit on top of those. We've got, when we bought the oven, we bought a separate set that we would use just for Pesach. So we've always gone through the process of lighting up the gas burners and putting them on for 10 or 15 minutes. Do we need to do that? Or do we need to do it anyway because of the base of the hob, as it were? Because our hob is part of our oven.
So the actual burner where the gas comes out,
yeah,
that does not require kashering.
Right.
The racks and the grills and the circle bits, if you have spares of those, then you wouldn't need to go through the process for the chametz ones.
Right.
If you're not going to use them over Pesach at all.
No, okay.
You would still need to lay some foil on the surface of the hob area and and make the holes for the burners.
Yeah.
But from what I can hear from your question, if you've got separate racks and separate discs, then you wouldn't need to do that process for your chametz ones.
Okay.
Mark?
Presumably, if you're foiling the grills, then before every cooking session, if you want to deem it that, you need to ensure there's no tearage, to ensure that there's no contamination.
That's a good question. It's a good question because any food that comes into contact there, you're not really going to be eating.
No, granted, but you don't. But at the same token, you don't want to risk any potential chametz that. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute it jumps up.
Let me come back to you on that one because I wonder if it is definitely the same thing. Obviously it's always better to err on the side of caution, but I would want to get a solid answer for you there. Okay.
If you've cleaned it beforehand thoroughly, and then you put the tin foil over the top, then there's not going to be any chametz coming into contact with that area once Pesach begins.
You could say the same about your work surfaces as well, but we still make sure to cover our work surfaces if there's chances of things having been absorbed and then sent back up again into the food. So I wouldn't want to definitively answer without prior consultation with my local rabbinic authority. When it comes to ovens, so ovens are tricky in some circumstances. When it comes to ovens, we want to make sure that the ovens are clean. And that can be difficult and it can be a lot more arduous. And so wherever possible, get help so that it's not solely on you necessarily, wherever possible. But we do want to make sure that our ovens are clean. And we want to actually pay attention also, again, to where the rubber seals are around the openings of our ovens, because even professional cleaners don't always get those completely done. So if you're having a professional cleaner come to do your oven, it's still worthwhile just checking the rubber seals as well. But once you've done that, then you should blitz the oven on the highest heat for 1 to 2 hours. And again, after the oven has had a chance to cool, you should cover the racks, the trays, you should cover them in foil. And then your oven will be good to go, all being well. If you are in an extenuating circumstance, and especially this year where people are not necessarily being able to go everywhere they might like to go for Pesach, be it hotels, be it family members, whatever it is. If you are in a position where you just cannot get your oven clean, then in such a circumstance, you can triple wrap your food, either with multiple layers of foil, or if you're using disposable disposable baking tins and baking trays, so you can double up on the trays, double up on the lids, use 2 of them when you're cooking, and then you can put that into your oven as normal. But that's really only if you can't, for whatever reason, clean your oven properly. And then the only other point that we've got on ovens, as you'll see when you see the handouts, is that toaster ovens are not possible to kasher for Pesach, and so you shouldn't be using the same toaster oven that you would use during the year. If you do need a toaster oven for Pesach, then you should be trying to find an alternative. I don't really know what we use toaster ovens for, but if it's for toast, then yeah, you can't be eating that anyway. Richard, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to say, we had an email earlier today from Oven Clean to say that they're not coming round this year. So if anybody has booked Oven Clean or anyone else like that, they may want to check that they're still coming round, because I suspect they won't.
Thank you very much indeed. That's a very helpful thing. So a few more things on the kitchen, and then we need to start wrapping it up. I've already gone over time. Ventilator shafts on top of your ovens, on top of your hobs, I should say. It's recommended to cover the bottom surface layer with foil, and that will be because during the year you never really know what has been ventilating up that could then melt and fall back down again when you're cooking your Pesach food. So by having foil in place, that removes that problem.
Sorry, can I just ask, that's inside the ventilator?
No.
Outside?
The outer lower surface.
Oh, the outside, okay. What about
the ventilator?
What about the like the grids on the cooker hoods? You know, like the wire mesh grids?
So that's what you would be covering.
But then that wouldn't allow the airflow to go through if you're covering it in foil.
Correct. So if you do have concerns about this, then speak to us afterwards.
My grids on the cooker hood you take them off and you put them in the dishwasher for cleaning normally.
So I would say that anybody that has an individual question about the ventilator area, we'll talk about that after,
Okay.
and after we've done the recording. Okay, when it comes to cupboards, people have, you know, they like to take everything out, wipe everything down. But if you're going to be selling the cupboards, if you're going to be not using the plates and the bowls and the whatever's in these cupboards over Pesach, then don't worry about cleaning them. Seal them up, put a sticker on or a sign that says that it's chametz, put a bit of tape over the door, and you don't need to worry about it because you've sold all of the chametz that's on your dishes. By the way, we don't sell our dishes, we sell the chametz that's on the dishes. All right, so we're selling that anyway. We're nullifying it anyway. We don't own it. So don't feel like you have to go through your entire kitchen. Just close it up, seal it up, and that is sufficient for Pesach. With a fridge and freezer, give everything a wipe down, make sure it's all clean. And then some people like to put in covers on the shelves of the fridge. Strictly speaking, it's not necessary. So just make sure that the fridge is wiped down on the inside. And then if you are needing to store chametz items in these spaces over Pesach, and you're selling them, of course, then just put them in a separate place in the fridge, in the freezer, mark it up so that it's clear, and cover it up, hide it away in those areas, and then you're good to go as well. We have a few more items. We have pots and pans. When it comes to pots and pans, ideally, we should be purchasing new ones or using a set of Pesach pots and pans. But if you do have unique circumstances this year, then please speak to the rabbinic team about that. Cutlery and crockery. So silverware, you can use on as you can use the same set of cutlery, the same set of silverware you can use during the year and on Pesach. You just have to kosher it. But it's a very straightforward system. All you would need to do is make sure that the knives and the forks and the spoons are clean, boil up a pot of water, and it can be any pot that you boil up, and then put each item of silverware into the pot for a short time, and then remove it. You have to be careful. Use appropriate safety gloves and mechanisms for getting things in and out. Don't go burning yourselves. But we can use our silverware for Pesach if we first boiling it. If we first put it in for boiling. When it comes to plates, so again, ideally we should have separate plates and separate bowls and all that kind of thing. I was told to err on the side of caution of recommending disposables. But if we have no other options available, then if you have china that has not been used in the last 12 months or longer, then there are opinions that say that china can be used for Pesach as well. Again, you just have to make sure that things are clean. But again, if you need further guidance on this, please speak to the rabbinic team. When it comes to glasses, we can use those as well over Pesach. This is an interesting one. If you want to use your glasses that you use the rest of the year and you want to use them on Pesach, leave them in a bowl of cold water for 3 days. Change the water each day, and after that, they will be good to go for use on Pesach as well. Couple more things. We have microwaves that are very complicated to use on Pesach. So ideally, we shouldn't be using the same microwaves that we use the rest of the year round. We can buy new ones, that's completely allowed. But again, if you are in a particularly extenuating circumstance, please speak to us about microwaves. Hot plates are very straightforward as well. You give them a clean down, you give them a wipe down, you turn them on for half an hour, and after they've cooled, then you just cover that with foil, and that is good to go for Pesach. When it comes to hot water urns, we can use the same hot water urns that we use the rest of the year round. We can use them on Pesach as well. But there is a caveat. There is a condition. It is problematic if you have been, warming chametz food up on there. Some people like to put their challahs on top of their urns just to warm them through a little bit before they use them for lunch or whatever it is. So, or for dinner. So if you have done that, then there are questions as to whether you'd be able to use it. But either way, you just want to make sure it's clean, make sure it hasn't come into contact with things during the year. But then if it's cleaned on the inside and the outside, then then you are able to use it on Pesach as well. The final thing here is Kiddush cups. If it is a pure silver Kiddush cup, then you can kasher a pure silver Kiddush cup. You have to make sure it's clean, you have to make sure it's polished, and after you've waited 24 hours, then you'd be able to process it and kasher it in the same way as your knives and forks. So you can chuck it into a boiling pot of water for a short time, and then you've got a Kiddush cup ready and raring to go for Pesach. There is one extra item, which for some people watching will be the most important item they could possibly use over Pesach, and that is their Nespresso machines. For some people, that is like the be-all and end-all of Pesach. I don't drink coffee at all, ever. I think it's poison. Don't know why you guys drink it. But anyway, Nespresso machines are actually okay for use on Pesach because the pods are suitable for Pesach. There is one exception. That exception is the Nespresso Virtuo Vanizio. If you look on the KLBD website, the search engine that shows you which things are kosher for Pesach and which are not, that is the one that is listed as not being suitable for Pesach. So if you have used that, please get in touch so that we can explore whether you can still use it for Pesach. But if you haven't used that particular pod, then it's fine to use. The milk frother is the one thing that does need some attention. And the recommendation for milk frothers, or they do have a name, but I can't remember what they're called.
Aerators.
Thank you very much. Didn't hear what you said, but it sounded right. So for a milk frother, leave it for 24 hours. Don't use it. Wash it, obviously, and make sure it's clean. And then, after you've left it clean for 24 hours, you can put it into the pan of hot water and then wait for it to dry, obviously, and all the rest of it. And then you can even have lattes on Yom Tov. Of course, leaving appropriate lengths of time between the consumption of meat and dairy.
You can't do that with an electric aerator.
Well, you might be able to if you leave everything to dry out.
But you said you need to dip it into hot water.
Yes.
Into boiling hot water. But they tend to be plastic on the outside. So,
And metal on the inside. But I'm talking about the Nespresso ones.
Yeah.
Right? So the Nespresso ones, which is like a capsule.
Yeah, I've got a separate coffee machine, an espresso, and then there's a separate aerator. It's a completely different machine. And so if
you are concerned, I am talking about the capsule one that kind of goes right on there.
Yeah.
And it's got the little button on it, and then it works its magic and it does its thing, and then somehow, boom, frothed milk. I know I haven't got one. Yeah, I've got. Okay, so if we're not talking about that particular kind of frother, then come see me after class. Nescafe Dolce Gusto apparently is also kosher for Pesach, but I haven't looked into and received guidance on that particular coffee machine. So if you are asking about that, ask me separately as well. Just a couple of final points. We have a problem at the moment that our Keli Mikvaot around the country and around the world are not in use because of the virus. So if you do have questions about immersing new dishes and pots and pans and all that kind of thing, then please speak to myself, Rabbi Feldman, so that we can best advise you. But that is the end of this summary.
I've got two questions, please.
Okay, I will do my best to answer them.
Okay, very quickly. Going back to the cupboards.
Yeah.
We tend to clean the cupboards and then line the cupboards with paper or whatever it happens to be. Are you suggesting here that if they're cleaned thoroughly, you don't necessarily need to line the cupboards?
Strictly speaking, one does not need to line the cupboards.
Okay, and second question, going back to the Nespresso, if you can just scroll up again, please, on your PDF. The Vanizio, if that's been used during the year in that coffee machine, are you then saying that coffee machine cannot be used over Pesach?
I'm saying that I will need to get clarity on an answer to that question.
Okay, can you do that, please?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you.
So can I just check, with the Nespresso machine, are you saying you don't need to run any hot water or do anything other than clean out the outside of the unit?
It would be a good idea to wipe it down.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it will have been used, and also if you are concerned that things have been spilt in its proximity during the year, so fine. So then we need to be a bit nervous about what it looks like and making sure that it's all cleaned out and everything like that. But by and large, the coffee machine itself would have been used for coffee, which is kosher for Pesach.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that requires attention is the frother.
Yeah.
Or whatever you called it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you would still need to wipe it down in the same way you would need to wipe down surfaces. And those kinds of things.
Just on the ventilator, on the cooker hood, when you take away that grill, which you can then clean perhaps in the dishwasher, you can then just swap out the filter. So you can take out the old filter and you can just put a new filter in its place. So by the time you've done
you mean
that,
replace the panels?
Well, it's underneath the cooker hood. As the grill comes down to be cleaned, there will be like a fiber type cloth filter, and that just pops out, and you can just get a replacement, which is what we tend to do most years.
Okay.
And then you're basically putting that back in, clean grill underneath, and then you're good to go again.
So I'm not an expert on every kind of ventilator.
It's just a cooker hood.
So it could. No, I appreciate that, but I'm not an expert on them. So what I was offering was a piece of advice that would get us through Pesach, which levels the playing field for the whatever you want to call it, for level 2 and up, the big boss levels. Then there could be solutions that would allow you to use your ventilator as normal. But if a person's looking to not get bogged down with the intricacies of those arrangements, and at the very least they can put silver foil underneath it, and then it's good to go.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to end this waste of a Facebook live stream, which has just failed completely. But this Zoom one has been absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to wish everybody a good night and a good evening. In 10 minutes, we're going to be on with the Master Your Mishnah class. But that's it for now. I'm going to wish you all a wonderful evening.